right. Hi, everybody who has no idea who I am. That's fine. I don't know who I am either on a good day. So, anyway, I wanted to start doing something here today just for fun because I'm off for the summer and I have nothing better to do with my life than inflict myself upon people who can always, of course, hit the back button. So, it's not that bad, right? So, I thought what I would do is I would talk a little bit about some Warhammer stuff. And I know there's a ton of lore channels. There's a ton of book review channels. I am not in competition of those because they can do it way better than I can. And I'm not about to do that. But one thing I can tell you about me is I'm not an AI. Also, I am an English professor. I teach college, I teach literature. I have a PhD in comp lit. So I know a little bit about how to read a text in a way that might be interesting to you. I don't know. Because I know that sometimes people complain that sometimes a lot of the Warhammer books seem a bit of a slog. And maybe some of the stuff that we talk about can help make them less sloggy to you. That's my theory. That's my thought. We'll see how it goes. All right. So for today, we're going to cover two stories, Andy Smiley's Flesh of Cretacia and Sons of Wrath. This is the order in which they are printed in the Sons of Sanguinius omnibus. And I honestly recommend reading them in the reverse order. Read Sons of Wrath, then read Flesh of Cretacia. A lot of stuff makes a lot more sense that way. If you're curious, by the way, about this background, remember when the Northern Lights were visible in a lot of states last year? This is one of the pics I took. I just thought it was better than a plain white background. So our spoiler-free synopsis, Flesh of Cretacia covers the origin of the Flesh Terror homeworld, the Death World, that have previously been part of the Imperium. Your enemies that are going to be fought there are minimally orcs. They are just the plot device, and maximally creepy, huge Xenos. Sons of Wrath covers the early days, the transitional era of the founding of the Flesh Terrors under Chapter Master Nassir Amit. The enemies are the Black Rage, each other, Eagle Warriors, lots of demons. And you can see that just from that, you might consider the chronology in which you should read them. Why you should read these, other than they're cool. Andy Smiley is fantastic at writing good combat scenes, and he writes some really good combat tableau. Not a lot of Warhammer writers have the same sort of cinematic eye that Smiley does. There's combat scenes that are just absolutely breathtaking, and he's so good at it. Read it for that, if nothing else. There's a lot of good lore of the Flesh Terrors, which we love, both their foundation and their character. If you like your grimdark to be pretty darn grimdark, everyone is awful. So there's that. And there's also Dreadnought Pokeball. I will not be explaining until later. Spoilers, everything from here on out is going to be heavily spoilering both of these texts. The reason I feel comfortable doing this is if you know things, it doesn't necessarily change whether or not you will enjoy it. It might change how you enjoy it, but it will not change whether or not you enjoy it or not. And the example I always use is every one of us has a movie we've seen 5, 10, 15 times. Me and Apocalypse Now, me and Hot Fuzz. I put these movies on all the time, still get sucked in every single time. I know exactly what's going to happen. I know the next line of dialogue. I still get caught up in it. So I firmly believe that knowing some spoilers, voluntarily knowing spoilers, is okay. So if you are anti-spoiler, this is your sign to click away. If you are not anti-spoiler, then please hang around. So let's talk about themes. Every text, every story has a theme. Otherwise, it's just going to be a chaotic, random events kind of happened, I guess. And we're not supposed to have something that sort of stitches it together. How do we know the story's over if there's no story, right? The theme is what makes it a story instead of a random collection of events. The theme in Sons of Wrath is pride and leadership. It's going to be about pride and leadership. Big themes in Flesh of Cretacia could be seen as man versus nature, both his own and outside of himself. Theme, however, is always a full sentence. You can't just say, well, the theme is pride. What about pride? The theme is leadership. What about leadership? Because that's what makes it special. The author has something they want to say about this. I also want to talk about this man versus nature thing. When I was in school, which was heavily in the throes of the new critical era, which is primarily how I'm going to be approaching a lot of these for the most part, we had this idea that, of course, story involves conflict and the resolution of that conflict. That's a good way to think about it. But what they did is they tried to dumb it down a little too much for us. And so they would tell us things like there's only like 5 main themes. Let me see how many I can remember. Man versus man, man versus woman, man versus nature, man versus technology, man versus himself. Oh, I got all 5, which is great when you're a beginner. But after a while, you realize that that doesn't cover everything. And in fact, it feels like you're trying to shove things into boxes where they don't necessarily fit. So it's worthwhile to think about keep the idea of a conflict, something versus something else, but maybe give up the reductive idea, because that dumbs it down. That really strips away a lot of the work that a good author does. All right, let's talk about it. Let's get into some characters. We got Nassir Amit. Boy, we love this guy, I say sarcastically. I don't like him. Now, I know I've read just enough of the Horus Heresy to know that I should not hate him as much as I do, because he is one of the few people who feels comfortable standing up to Sanguinius. He's vocally against the Council of Nicaea, all of that sort of stuff. I respect that. In both of these texts, he's not easy to like. We'll put it that way. I don't like that he makes tactically rash decisions. There's no real reason to land that many people on Cretacia. You could have sent down a scout company. You could have sent down a smaller number. You didn't need to commit like half your forces off of the ship onto the planet, where you would lose most of your death company, most of your scout company, your dreadnought, etc., etc. Chasing after some orcs. So he overcommits. I mean, that's kind of like a Nassir Amit character flaw. He does overcommit. He also has a secret torture room. Kind of uncool. He's yelling at everybody for being sort of emotionally immoderate. And then what he does to moderate his own emotions is he has a secret torture room hidden on the blueprints of the ship. Where when he's in a mood, he will go and he will torture a traitor. He has traitor prisoners basically held in cages there, and he will murder one of them. And that is how he gets his emotional regulation. Yeah, so he's kind of a hypocrite about that. And his leadership style, and I'm not going to read it out loud because I don't know if YouTube is going to flag me for this, but he does have what we might call BDE as his leadership style, and it doesn't always work. And the reason I'm using that sort of phallic terminology, it will be made clear to you in a few moments. He has this moment in Sons of Wrath where he kind of is given the message that he should back off, but by Flesh of Cretacia, he's entirely forgotten it, it's just so very him. Chaplain Zophal, my brain kept changing into Zofran. Most of my slides are going to have in jokes to myself, because you should read my dissertation. Like every 3rd page has a dumb joke. Chaplain Zophal is the most complex character in both of these stories. And I think it would work so much better if you read the stories in reverse order, because you see a lot more, you can understand a lot more his decision to sacrifice himself in Flesh of Cretacia as a sacrifice from somebody who's really at the end of his rope. He frees Omari, the Thousand-Son Sorcerer, loved the scene in the chapel, loved killing Ronja, did not love him talking Omari back into captivity, and did not love him sanctioning the torture room stuff. He literally and symbolically cleans up after Nassir Amit's messes. When Amit is done in his torture room, who takes up he's not only a chaplain, he's a janitor. He cleans up Nassir Amit's stuff. Really also did not love him massacring the remaining Eagle Warriors, though I understand his motivation. And we'll talk about the echo of this in a moment. But basically what's happened is some flesh terrors have attacked some Eagle Warriors. It was kind of a mistake, kind of misunderstanding, kind of a little bit of a black rage. It's complicated, hashtag. But what he does is he says, wow, if any of these Eagle Warriors go back and tell Gilliman that this happened, that's going to be the end of the Flesh Terrors. So he views it as an existential threat, which is what sanctions him in his mind to blow up the rest of the Eagle Warriors and then lie to Amit about it. If you know your Nassir Amit lore, you're probably going, ding, ding, ding. I've heard some of this stuff before. Hang on to that thought. It also shows that chaplains are not about morality as we understand it. Morality being the idea of an absolute good and an absolute evil, because absolute evil is killing innocent people, even if they are Astartes. But in his case, the good is the preservation of the chapter. So he has a choice between morality and loyalty, and he chooses loyalty. Ronja can rewrite women who are not B words. This is one of my minor beefs I have with a lot of the Black Library. A lot of the female characters are just written as one note, petty, not very nice people. We'll see the text in a few moments. She's a case in point. Her arrogance obviously makes her prey to the demon, which she thinks is the ship. But what she did to that one crew member, which is the part we'll talk about it, is absolutely petty. And I am delighted that she died a miserable death. Sometimes you see that poetic justice working out, and she dies a poetically just death. The thing I want to sort of talk about with Ronja is the first time we meet her, we're told that a lot of pilots did not want to become the captains for the Flesh Terrors. Some of them even killed themselves rather than doing it. And she's like, ha ha, well, I didn't. So she's already, from the moment we meet her, giving off a couple of flags for us. This is something that Smiley's really good at. And I was looking at her and I was going, not sure if like. And turns out that I was right. We got to talk about Nuriel. I really wanted to like Nuriel because I love librarians. I love tech marines. I love dreadnoughts. I love all the sort of like side specialties of Astartes. I love them all. It's a thing. Okay. He's every reason people are wary about librarians. I do have to say, he's on a ship full of raging jerks, and most psychers tend to have a lot of empathy. And so it's got to not be easy for him. Okay. But still, like Ronja, he falls because of his arrogance and pride, giving in to an outsider from the promise of more power. Both think they're doing it to better serve their duty, kind of. And again, that goes back to the chaplain's choice between morality and loyalty. He is sort of in the same situation. He has a good death scene, et cetera, et cetera. But I also want to talk about this idea. The duty of combat and the worship of corn can kind of seem really hard to split a line between. You know what I mean? If your mission is to kill and you kind of enjoy it, how much are you allowed to enjoy it before you like cross a line? Right. And that's true not just of the Flesh Terrors, not even just of the Blood Angels, but kind of Astartes in general. This is a question that I think is worth holding in our minds the entire time we read the Black Library. All right. I love dreadnoughts, so we're also going to talk about Grigory. He dies in Flesh of Cretacia. And again, if you read them in the reverse order, you'd have met him and understood his deal. And it would have hit a little bit more. It really felt like a plot device in Flesh of Cretacia, which is just a terrible name for a story. I'm sorry. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. It feels really like, oh, this is just to ramp up how much danger we're in, that we're killing our nigh unkillable, right? He's fresh meat in Sons of Wrath. And the first thing we really see Nassir Amit do is make a decision. He has two Astartes who are near death. And these are all firstborns, by the way. I don't know if that matters to you. Two firstborn Astartes near death, and he has to decide which one he will inter in the dreadnought. And the other guy was actually in slightly better physical condition and had sort of like leanings towards being a chaplain. And then there was Grigory, and Amit chooses Grigory because he says the guy was near death and he was still shooting at the enemy. That's the kind of spirit we are about here in the Flesh Terrors. All right. More about Grigory, and he's the first time he meets him after he has been dreadnoughtified. The first thing he thinks is like, "Oh God, no, I would not want this." But he never expresses out loud any guilt or apology or even recognition that he was the one that put Grigory in the dreadnought. Like he has this sort of, uncanny dread of seeing a dreadnought, this uncanny revulsion, but he doesn't seem to be able to make the connection, which is very Nassir Amit. He's not really a good guy with the self-awareness to make that connection that he's the reason Grigory is a dreadnought now. Grigory is also awesome because he's one of those people who can talk back to Nassir Amit. Which again, Nassir Amit, remember, was one of the few who could talk back to Sanguinius. So we're starting to see some shadows here, right? My favorite moment is what I call the Dreadnought Pokeball. In the battle with Demon Nuriel, Amit throws something at Demon Nuriel's feet, and the demon says something like, what are you thinking? We've already established hand grenades, landmines. This stuff doesn't work on me. And Amit says something particularly badass, which I don't remember what it is. But it turns out that it's a teleportation beacon, and then pop, suddenly there's Grigory. the Dreadnought, and it is just one of those scenes where I tell you, Andy Smiley writes a great combat tableau. I don't like Nassir Amit, and I was on the edge of my seat cheering for this scene. So perfect, 10 out of 10, no notes. All right. So one of the things that we do when we are pretentious people with PhDs in comp lit is we look for something called a foil. If we think about a foil like aluminum foil, you can kind of see your reflection in it. It's kind of shiny, but it's not a great reflection. Like you're not going to tweeze your eyebrows in a piece of aluminum foil. That's the concept of a foil in literature, that it is a blurry reflection. So we can take a look at characters and say, are they blurry reflections of each other? The two obvious ones are Nuriel and Ronja. They are definitely blurry reflections of each other. They're in the same situation. Both of them fell to chaos demons. Both of them probably should have known better, but that's definitely more on Nuriel's fault. He definitely should have known better. She thought she was doing the right thing. She thought she was obeying the ship. She's just dumb. Nuriel fell willingly. So we can think about that they mirror each other that way. And both, of course, die. Amit is kind of a foil for any sort of leadership. We see Zofal and Omari. I'm sorry, Amit is kind of a foil with Grigory, or Grigory is more of a foil for Amit, like I was talking about. Grigory takes the place as one of the few who can talk back to Amit, just like Amit could talk back to Sanguinius and was very vocal in, say, Fear to Tread and stuff like that. Zofal and Omari are also, in a sense, foils because they are both concerned with some question about morality. Right? They both are trying to make good choices to save other people. And we'll talk about it a little bit more. I do have to talk about that relic knife, though, and talk about something else. And the big question I want us to think about here is sometimes a symbol is not a symbol. How can we tell when something happens in a story that it is symbolic, other than just like vibes, I guess? My students get very confused about this, and this is what I tell them. If the symbol, if the interpretation of the symbol underscores the action of the scene, it's a symbol. So not every time that people are whipping swords around is it a sort of phallic peen fest, if you will. Again, I'm trying not to get censored by YouTube. It's not a weenie fest every time that there's a sword drawn. Chain swords are not some sort of Freudian homoerotic weirdness. Fun fact, I sat at a conference once where somebody was saying that because there were people sword fighting in Beowulf, that it was a gay liberation narrative. I'm not going to do that to you guys. How do we know when a symbol, and particularly this case, a phallic symbol, is a phallic symbol? Something that looks like the male genital organs and represents, in a sense, masculinity, potency, authority, command, etc., when it underscores the action of the scene. So at the end of Sons of Wrath, Nama, the tech marine, has tried to take Nuriel's sword and fix it. And he admits defeat, and he says, instead, what I got for you is I made it into a relic knife, which is smaller than a sword. So in this case, we have a symbol of the fact that Nassir Amit got his like pee-pee smacked, if I can say it in this terminology. And he even says, maybe I should change my ways. Maybe I should. He has this moment where he's like on the brink of self-awareness. And as we see in Flesh of Cretacia, he lets that go. Another thing we do as English major types is look outside of a work for where have I seen this before? We can see this, as we started to do already, outside in other places of the lore, but even beyond that. So when I said that thing about Chaplain Zofal killing the Eagle Warriors, some of you who know your Nassir Amit might be saying, wait a minute, he killed a bunch of space wolves and it was covered up for him. He was actually going to, I think, confess. And somebody's like, no, we already lied to Sanguinius about it. You can't undo it. So this idea, what Zofal has done unknowingly, is basically an echo of the same thing that Amit did when he killed a bunch of non-bad people. So that's kind of interesting. And it kind of raises a question that we're expected to ask, and we are expected to ask a lot of questions of ourselves when we read particularly Space Marine books, because we keep getting told that they're not fully human, they're not fully human. We are constantly being asked to figure out where that line is. So how much do you give up of your values to protect others? We also got to talk about this. All blood angels, but particularly visible in the flesh terrors, we have this masculinity issue. And I know you might be saying to yourself, you sound like a woman. Why are you talking about masculinity? Well, because I wrote my dissertation in 2003. And so I've been writing about masculinity for over 20 years. Number two, as an outsider, I can see some things, just like we have Bram Stoker was an outsider. He wrote Dracula, poking at some of the sexual hangups of the British, the Victorian British. The same thing with Joseph Conrad. You can tell he studied modernist literature for a while. Joseph Conrad, a Polish outsider, was critiquing the end of imperialism in Heart of Darkness. Sometimes, and I'm not putting myself in the same category as those greats, but sometimes an outsider can see a few things, a piece of the puzzle that you might be a little too close to see. So I'm not trying to insult anybody. I'm just saying, like, I can see some things. I don't pretend to have the whole picture. What I can tell you is that men in Western society tend to be given, according to society, a limited array of social emotions that they can express without being called bad names, a wuss, a P word, implied to be homosexual, like that's bad. I don't get it, but whatever. You guys, those of you who grew up men, you know the ways that men talk about each other if they are, say, too emotional. There's a famous sort of video that circulates every now and then where it's a clip of people who are playing a video game, and one guy says, what would you do if I told you I was really sad? And people would be like, kill yourself, man. That's Western masculinity, right? Well, you show you're vulnerable, we're gonna no. And of course, and I know that they don't actually mean that it's all a joke, that it's all, quote, ball busting and so on. But there are some people who see that and take it seriously. So we see a lot of people who act as though it were true that the only emotion that a man can actually express is anger. How many times did I say actually? I don't know. So we see this where a lot of men are allowed to express anger, and anger can feel very cathartic, and anger can feel very powerful. Anger can also be very destructive. Anger can also be very good. Righteous fury, righteous anger. Read your Black library and do a search for words like anger, ire, wrath. I mean, it's everywhere. So where do we draw the line between that and the Black rage? The Black rage is basically that masculinity turned up to 11. You can't come back once you cross that line, right? You can be angry and you can back off. You can be angry and you can back off. So the Black rage is really a sort of comment on masculinity, this constant awareness that a lot of the blood angels have, and particularly the flesh terrors, that at any moment they could cross a line they cannot come back from. Right? In a sense, that is a level of masculinity. All right. Is Nuriel Faustus? While we are exploring things outside of the text, I'm going to take a look at Marlowe's Dr. Faustus in particular as my base text, because that's how most of us know it. A Faustian bargain, and the first thing I thought of it was, well, he made a deal with the devil. Ding, 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 deal with the devil, Faustus. It is and it isn't a Faustian bargain. Because the Faustian bargain is at its root a tragedy. So you can make a deal with the devil, but it's not necessarily a Faustian deal with the devil. There has to be some sort of level of tragedy. The tragedy of Dr. Faustus by Marlowe, and the text, the play makes it really clear. At any time, even when the devils are banging at his door at the 11th hour and 59th minute to come and tear his body into a bajillion pieces, if Faustus had fallen on his knees and prayed to God for forgiveness, he would have been forgiven. The text is very clear about this. So the tragedy is watching somebody, seeing the escape hatch, walking by the escape hatch like all the time, and just not going toward the escape hatch. It's the tragedy of you stopping yourself from your own salvation. Okay. There is no real salvation for Nuriel. He makes this deal with the devil, and there really isn't a chance that he has. So his death is not really that kind of tragedy. I am going to argue that it is a kind of tragedy because he wasn't wrong. Nuriel makes the deal with the demon because he wants more power, and he wants this power so he can assassinate Nassir Amit. And he wants to assassinate Nassir Amit because he's not wrong. So let's take a look at some pieces. And this is just a nice little piece from the beginning of the story about the dueling stone. The triumvirate represented the tempest of angels, the honorific duel the chamber was fashioned to host, where one combatant fought to protect Sanguinius while the other attacked. Nuriel grunted in derision. Sanguinius was dead. Now there was only attack. So this is Nuriel's headspace. And he's sort of giving us a nice little bit of lore, but it also shares Nuriel's worldview, that there's no defense anymore. There's power, and power can only be used in one direction, and that is to attack. He understands power. I'm not even going to go into it. We'll talk about biopower and Foucault another time perhaps, but he is really thinking that there is only one use of power, and that is attack. Compare that, I'm getting ahead of myself, but compare that with Balthiel in the Flesh Terrors under Gabriel Seth, and how he uses some of his sorcery as a protection attack thing. I'm talking about that shield dome he creates, but we'll talk about it. So according to him, there is no positive use of violence, and it also shows how historical reenactments can sort of become gamified and lose their essential core meaning. Like the idea that people don't connect a marathon with the Greeks and warfare and the tragedy of the urgency of getting that message across. All right, his Faustian arrogance. Here's Nuriel using his psyker powers in the warp, and Amit is not wrong to say, don't do that. Do not lecture me, chapter master, Nuriel sneered. Have I not proven myself more than capable? My mind and soul are as armored as the hull around us. Amit, of course, goes on to tell him, like, this whole ship has been like punched through a few times, like not the greatest comparison. But this again shows us that Nuriel really thinks that he is better than he is. The arrogance is a little too much, and he's been called out on it. I told you Ronja Nakan was a terrible person. She's a B word. This is the passage that turned me against her immediately, irrevocably. Never going to like this woman. Thank God she's dead. Bowden, Ronja's aide, looked like a badly dubbed Pict recording as he spoke, the movements of his mouth at odds with the words coming from it. 1 week out of the training schola, and Bowden had been late to duty. He had wasted precious seconds straightening his uniform and slicking his hair back. She had seen to it that he would never look polished again, injecting the muscles of his face with wasting chemicals. In time, if he redeemed himself, she would have his mouth replaced by a Vox implant. Okay, come on, right? I'm just going to stop there. That's so petty. And that's so petty for not a good reason. Like, there are reasons in Warhammer where people get punished. That's not a reason to punish him to that level. Even if you think like, hey, you don't be late trying to get all vain and stuff. She punished him beyond the level. She is a terrible person. So we see her over compensation as well. She is desperate for power. And when she has power, this is how she enacts it. Not cool. I have to have a couple of Omari and not fangirl moments. I am not a fool, Chaplain, Omari, eyes bore no malice. I knew the minute you released me from the cell that it would come to this. He upturned his blade and planted it in the deck. The freedom you mentioned could only be the blessed release of death. I thank you anyway. You have at least allowed me to die in the Emperor's service. Guys, do you see it? What's happened here is he's one of the prisoners in Amit's secret torture room. There's a demon on the ship, has taken over, causing all sorts of chaos. Zofal goes and asks for Omari's aid because Omari is a Thousand Sons sorcerer, and Omari agrees. And he's promised his freedom. Zofal is going to back on this one real quick, but he's promised his freedom. And now this speech happens after they have defeated Ranjanakan. And he's saying, like, I knew it all along. I knew that this was only going to end one way. And I agreed to it anyway. So this is like the guy. When I said that he's like a foil for Zofal, he is the only guy with like a moral compass here. Okay. Because that's hardcore. That is hardcore. But Death may grant you peace, O Marianat, said Zophal, but I need your help bringing the same to another. Wait, you promised him freedom. You promised him freedom. You promised him freedom. Okay, Zophal, why am I disappointed in you? Amit sates his bloodlust with the lives of traitors, says Zophal. It is a savage practice, but justifiable. Is it though? Yet, if he takes you, a loyalist by word and deed, then he is lost. It is a line he must never cross. Sorry about that typo. A temptation he must resist. Zophal sighed, suddenly tired. It is my hope that one day Amit will free you of his own accord. We never find out. We never find out one way or the other what happens to him. We know that Amit is not a great person, but Zophal hasn't walked away from him at the end of Flesh of Cretacia, so not sure. We leave that one open. That's Schrodinger's Thousand Sun Sorcerer, basically. But here we have Zophal again, knowing that he can talk the talk of right and righteousness, but he promised him freedom, and now he is talking him back into going back into that tortured cell. But he's doing it again. He's always choosing loyalty over morality. This is another place where he chooses loyalty over morality. His loyalty to Amit, he wants Amit to sort of redeem himself by drawing a line. I wish we knew what happened. I wish we knew what happened. All right. Let's talk about Nuriel, because this is delightful. Nuriel sucks and is also right. I sort of got off my Nuriel train. We're back on the Nuriel hate train. Nuriel rasped in pain. He's given over his body to the demon. He's confronting Nassir Amit, right? Nuriel rasped in pain, clutching his head as his face twitched and convulsed. No, this is my victory. You swore. He stopped short again, his eyes smoldering as they flashed crimson. The demon returned. He's pathetic, is he not? I mean, how much do you suck if the demon that you made a bargain with is like smack talking you to the guy you're supposed to kill? Like, that's brutal. The demon's face twisted with contempt as it tossed away Nuriel's weapon. Small of mind, driven by selfish ego. Not wrong. But this is where Nuriel's not wrong. Nuriel, again, wanted the demon's help to kill Nassir Amit because he thinks Nassir Amit is a threat to the flesh terrors. This is a bunch of paragraphs sort of squished down. But not you, he's talking to Amit. Something far greater drives you, flesh terror, because remember the chapter is named after Amit's sobriquet that he gains during the heresy. We have seen your future. We have watched you from the immaterium, shared in your rapture as you've killed. Yours is a glorious tapestry of murder and death. Kind of foreshadowing, like it's hard to miss the foreshadowing that something very bad is going to happen, that Nassir Amit is like an inch away from falling to corn, which if you follow Nassir Amit, the implication is very heavy that he did in fact fall to corn. Seth, at one story later on, Seth finds a helmet that seems to be Nassir Amit's, and through it he sees what looks like a demon city and Amit being a demon prince of corn. This is the warning. This is the warning that Amit could maybe moderate himself, but as we know, he doesn't listen. In Flesh of Cretacia, okay, some more text. I just loved this lore bit. Because it shows that they all share blood, and it allows us to think about this idea, because one thing that is very obvious with the blood angels is this idea of these Christian echoes, if you will. They have a sort of Christ-like sacrifice in the great angel, in Sanguinius, and we also have a lot of these. They're not the only ones with the grail. I don't remember the name of the grail right now, but the blood drinkers also have a grail that they drink of, a cup they drink of, but their cup, you get a sip of it when you've already fallen to the black rage, and it gives you a moment of clarity where you can decide if you want to go to a death company, if you want to get the emperor's peace right then and there. But this idea of them having grails and drinking blood from the grails, it's very obviously a reference to Christian communion, right? In this case, this idea, the communion is the communion of the brothers. They're drinking the commingled blood of all of the other brothers, those who have survived and those who have also passed along. It's pretty cool. All right. Asmodel says, when you have bled for the chapter, only to watch those you have suffered for devolve into madness, then you may talk to me about vengeance. One thing that's interesting about masculinity is it does this. It takes suffering and makes it into a currency, right? That you have to earn a right to talk. We see this in, say, the fire service or third service EMS, where probies, the people who are new, who are probationary members, they don't get to talk. They don't get to sit down in some stations, right? They're kind of treated, it's like a hazing ritual until they earn the right to sit at the table, to actually put their feet up, right? This idea that you have to earn through suffering, through effort, the right to have that seat at the table. In this case, it's very clearly the way you get that right to sit at the table is through physical suffering, right? You have bled for the chapter and watched your friends devolve to the Black Rage. Then you get to talk. Until then, Asmodel has no use for you. You gotta be on his level, and that's how you get there. Cool beans. And this is our last two slides, I think. Zophal's spiral, because of course, obviously all the chapters are different, but the flesh terrors are very nihilistic. Okay, there's and we'll talk about it a little bit in a second here. In the last moments of life, we embrace the darkness, for there is no light after death, no forgiveness, only the blackness of rage and the absolution of death. This is a sermon Zophal sort of preaches about death. There seems to be varying answers in the even among the Astartes about whether or not there is an afterlife. Obviously, the Black Templars, who worship the emperor as the god, believe in an afterlife. The Nova Marines are the ones that I mentioned here. The Nova Marines tattoo themselves so that when they die, the emperor can read their histories of valor on the tattoos on their body and sort of make a decision, right? You get the idea. Here we have the sort of official, since he's the chaplain, Flesh Terror Creed, that there ain't nothing. There's no afterlife. When you die, you're dead. That's it. Which makes life at one level more precious because it's the only one you got and nothing happened. When it's over, when the ride's over, the ride's over. But it also makes it less, in a sense. For nihilists, they view life as pointless. Like, what's the point of anything? Like, why are we even here? All right. When we understand this, it changes our moral calculus, right? It changes how we view things. If we're saying this character does not believe he's going to get a reward for any of his actions, he doesn't believe he's going to get punished for any of his actions, which leads to, I choose to destroy. This is such a metal line. I choose to destroy, and in my destruction, my brothers shall find salvation. So what's happened is they're under attack by this massive, like, Titan-sized Xenos, as far as I can tell. And Zophal has taken the Death Company, and they're climbing the back of this volcano so he can be in the volcano, which is a wonderful symbolism of anger, violence, uncontrolled heat, rage, etc., and set off a bomb to make it even more uncontrollable. So the wrath, this like flesh of wrath of Cretacia, basically. He's climbing up with the Death Company. As he does this, the Death Company falls away, so he's the only one left. And this kind of bothers me. I have a soft spot for Death Company people, the damned and the Death Companies, because they want to go out fighting. They don't want to go out, rock climbing, if you will, but that's how they go out. It feels like that's not how they want to go out. So I feel bad about them. But the whole idea symbolically is that here is the spiritual leader and he's stripped away of everything. So when he reaches the body of the volcano, the caldera of the volcano, he is literally stripped alone by himself. There's nothing else around him. And he makes the statement which creates the meaning of his death. I choose to destroy. It's a conscious choice. Unlike the Death Company, who have no choice, he's choosing to destroy. And he does it specifically to save his brothers from this Xenos. He, in fact, does practice what he preaches. But again, if you read the two stories in the order in the timeline, we also get that idea that Zophal, who was suddenly tired after talking with Omarianat, he's been bearing the weight of Omarianat. He's been bearing the weight of the killing of the Eagle Warriors. He's been bearing the weight of all these decisions he has made. And that's why he volunteers, because Amit himself, whatever I say about Nassir Amit, the man is willing to do the dirty work himself. He was originally going to do this climb in the volcano and blow it up thing himself. We could easily have assigned Scout Dude number 3. Instead, we choose the chaplain. We don't choose a company champion, right? We choose the chaplain to do this because the chaplain has to be the one to have this religious sort of quasi-religious moment of redemption. This is his attempt, I think, to redeem himself, and in his last act, as he's done all along, make sure that the chapter continues to survive. That's what gives his life meaning. Every decision in his life that we have seen him make has been to make sure that the chapter survives. Is it capital G good, capital E evil? He doesn't care. What matters to him is his brothers survive. And that's he walks the walk, he talks the talk. We can't not respect that. So these stories kind of start to show the slow grinding downfall of Nassir Amit and his leadership, and the fact that the real tragedy of Nassir Amit is he can't change. He can't. Even when he wants to at the end of Sons of Wrath, he is incapable of change. Some people are not meant to be leaders. I'm not dissing Amit for this. Amit in combat is a sight to behold. The man kicks all the butt, but he's maybe not leadership. Past deeds do not necessarily indicate wisdom or present worth. It sounds like I'm just picking on Nassir Amit all the time. He was given the position by Gilliman when he carves up all of the legions into these smaller chapters. Is this a tactical mistake by Gilliman? Is this one of many tactical mistakes by Gilliman? I believe so. And the mistake Gilliman makes is thinking that your war record means you are a good leader. It's not always the case. And also the original sin of the flesh tearers. We see this original sin of Amit killing the space wolves that's echoed in the, Nuriel killing the Eagle Warriors and Zophal finishing off the Eagle Warriors. And we're going to see this original sin continued on next time when we talk about trial by blood, also known as the trial of Gabriel Seth. Seth is on trial for the over exuberant violence of the flesh terror. So a lot of these little chickens are going to come home to roost. All right. So I hope you kind of enjoyed what we were doing here. I hope you had a good time. And that's it for me.